Welcome to another video of Putting It All Together. In this video, we're mainly going to be doing another example of the box model and doing it in a way that's a little different than before. One thing in particular is we're going to be dealing with the units of pixels, which are probably easier for most people to understand. So we're going to do that. We're going to talk about what the box model is, and and then we're going to apply it to some paragraphs. So basically, the box model can be done with just about any element in HTML. It's that the concept is basically everything in its root is in some type of a box, a rectangle, shall we say. And by default, it just fits whatever's in there. Like if it's text in a paragraph, it's in a little rectangle. We don't tend to think of it as a little rectangle, but we probably should, because that's really what it is. So the idea is take these elements and format them so that they A, look good, and B, fit with other elements well. So there are some parts of these elements that we can manipulate with CSS to accomplish these goals. So for starters, let's take a look here at the home page on the Historic Lighting site, and you'll see that there are 3 paragraphs here. And we're going to make these paragraphs look better today. You may say, well, they look okay, Mr. Arnold. There's nothing really wrong with them. And you're right, there's nothing hugely wrong. One thing is if I change my screen, see how they move in and out, which there's nothing particularly wrong with that. The thing that I like the least about how they are right now is see how they're pushed up against the picture so tight. Well, that's going to be able to be fixed using this box model. So the concept is that we're going to see a rectangle, or we're going to think of a rectangle around each of these paragraphs. So there's actually the content inside the rectangle. There's padding between the content and the bounding box of the rectangle, which right now is invisible, but we can see that padding by adding a border, which is the next step out. Where's the border around these? And then after the border is something called a margin. And the margin is how far spaced from one item to the next. Basically a cushion, an invisible cushion around the element. So to begin this, what we're going to do is I'm going to come over to the index page, and I'm going to create a style section. And I'm not going to do this in the styles.css, although I could. The reason being, I only want to affect paragraphs on this page. And second, for one thing, but secondly, I also don't want to be flipping back and forth between the pages in this video. Everything can be done on this page. So I'm going to go ahead and, oops, I did one line too many. Before the end of the head, I'm going to do a style tag, and then I'm going to skip and do a close style. Okay, and this is where it's going to be. And it's all going to be with the tag selector rule. So I'm going to do it as the paragraph rule. Now, remember, as I mentioned before, everything's a box. So I could make a general class that has this box and then have the paragraph be applied to that general class. So you can do that. You can make anything apply to that class if you want. So again, you don't have to do this. I'm doing it for all paragraphs on this page, because a paragraph, just like any element, is really in its foundation represented as a box. So the first thing that we typically do when we're setting a box is set a width and a height. But I'll show you there's a problem with that in our case. If I set height to be, let's say, 50 pixels. Let's do 50 pixels. Okay, so I'm going to save this. And when you come over here, you're going to see when I refresh this page, look at what happened. It all came together. Now, if I move this over, it gets better. And eventually they get far enough away to where they look okay. But I'm limiting the height. And so eventually they start running over each other. So this is not good. In our case, what would be best is to set a width instead and let the height push down. And then we won't have that problem. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's set a width. And I'm also going to make the width instead of 50, I'm going to make it 300 so that there's plenty of room. So I'll save that. Come over, oops, got my Zoom sharing here. Sorry about that. There we go. Refresh it, and now you can see that the table no longer moves because it doesn't need to. Now, I don't have enough text on here to cause a problem with this. And even if I do this, look, the table stays and I can just scroll. So this is a really good setup to start with. So we have set a width to the paragraph. Now I'm going to skip the next part, which is padding, because that's the next part after the content. Where do we want? We want the padding. But I'm going to skip that and put a border. And I'm going to put the border to be 1 pixel. And then I'm going to put, you could do solid, but I'm going to do something you probably haven't seen yet, dotted black. Okay, so I'm going to save that, and I'm going to come over here. Oops, where'd it go? Back down. Okay, so I'm going to hit enter. And you see that it is really tight around here. There's no padding. There's no space. Now there's some default space between paragraphs, but we're going to modify that too. So we're going to, by setting margins, but before that, let's add padding. Padding is going to give us some space around the border on all sides. Now think about what's going to happen, because the text is going to need to be more lines, isn't it? It's either going to need to get wider or taller as far as the box itself goes if we're adding more space around it. It can't get wider because we set the size to be the 300. So it has to be taller. So what I'm going to do is before the border, because I want to do it in the correct order, I'm going to do the padding. I mean, I don't have to do it in the correct order, but it makes logical sense to. Padding, and I'm going to put 15 pixels to start with. So when I do that, watch what happens here. So look at it right now, how tight it is around the dotted borders. Now see, I have the 15 padding around. That has now helped this situation of it touching the picture over here. But there's still more. There's the margin. You see how by default, the paragraphs have some space between, but they're real close to the picture. So the padding plus the margin outside is not the same. So we want to fix that. So we're going to change the margin as well. So after border, I'm going to do margin, colon, and I think I'll do 15 pixels on it as well for starters here. We're going to play with this a little bit. We'll adjust it some, but let's just see what that does. So remember, there's going to have to be 15 pixels here. Now see how much better this is looking? So we have boxes now. Now, something to take note of, this space and this space are the same. Some people would say, wait a minute, Mr. Arnold. This one's right, 15 pixels, but there should be 15 and 15. 15 from the top paragraph, 15 from the bottom paragraph to make 30. That's not how the box model works. The margins take the bigger of the two for elements that are next to each other. So if we had two non-like elements, say our paragraphs have 15, but let's say something else they're next to has 20. Well, instead of being 35 or just 15, it's the just 20. It takes the bigger of the two on that side. But since these are all the same element, they all have the 15. So they're each going to have 15 between each other, and then 15 on the left and 15 on the right. And if I make this bigger, you see it does not extend the table. Okay, so let's try a few more sizes here, just so you can get an idea of what's going on here a little better. So let's do a margin of 25. So if we do that, see, the padding is still the 15, but now the margin is bigger. It's 10 pixels more, it's the 25. The table did get bigger, but it's still not going to expand as I move it from side to side because these are fixed sizes. The border, I could make the border bigger too. Let's make it 5 pixels. Okay, so there's my dotted border. It's 5 pixels. There's 15 inside and 20 outside. So there's something else we can add to this. And basically, it's called box sizing. So I want you to pay careful attention to what happens here. Box dash sizing colon border box. So if we do this and save it, now watch carefully. What happened? It looked like it got narrower, didn't it? Look again. Watch what happens when I take it out. Remember how wide this is. See how it got wider? Interesting, huh? Put it back. Okay, so this property, box sizing set to border box, is for those of us out there who don't want to do math. What do I mean by that? Well, remember how we said the width is 300? Sometimes we'll know how much space we have. So the width, when the box sizing is set to border box, is everything inside the border and in. So it includes the content, it includes the padding, and includes the border. Does not include the margin, but it includes everything else. So what that means is that before, without it, the content was getting 300, plus we had 15 padding on all sides, plus we had the 5 pixel border on all sides. So we had 15 plus 5, we had 20 pixels lost from our area of 300 on each side. But now, well, that, I mean, sorry. Let me rephrase that. I think I just said that backwards. Before we had 300 for content without this line, 300 for content, 15 for padding on each side, and 5 for border on each side. So that means each side had an additional 20. So actually, it was 300 plus 20 plus 20 for the overall width. But we may know that we only have the 300 to deal with. So if we do this, it says the 300 includes the padding and the border. So that's why, again, I think I already did this. Let's see. Yeah. So that means that this total amount is 300 pixels. And if I take it out again, now only the content is 300 pixels. Which way you decide to do it is totally up to you. It doesn't really matter, but you need to know what you did, and it would be best if you stayed consistent on a whole website with this, if possible. And again, remember, regardless, the margins stay the same. Margins don't change with this border box. Well, I mean, none of them change, but I mean, the margins are not included versus excluded. It doesn't matter. The margins are the space between the elements, not the elements, not referring to the element sizes at all. So what if we want to work with this a little bit different? So I'm going to set this, instead of a paragraph, to a class box model. So if I save this, the paragraph should lose what I just did. Now I'm going to apply it to one of them. Say, look at that. In my case, the paragraph is more ideal for the page because I'm doing it to all paragraphs. In fact, I could even do it to this down here. I could make this into a paragraph. It's not a paragraph right now. So I'm going to undo that. I just wanted to show you that you could do this. So basically what's happened is I have made a class for boxes that I can apply any element to make it look like that. So I'm going to change this back to being a paragraph. And now I'm going to go down to my info picture down here, and I'm going to make this be a paragraph. I'm going to save it. See, look at that. So now I do have a little bit of a spacing problem here that, well, actually, no, I don't. No, it's fine. Never mind, that's fine. This is just the margin up here, so that's good. Now I'm going to fine tune it so it looks better on the page, because I'm actually going to leave it with these paragraphs like this because I didn't want it up close anyway. So this is perfect. But I figured it was something we could do on one of the lessons, on one of the videos. So let's go ahead and fix this up. I'm going to actually make the, let's work on the size first. So I'm going to make it 350 if I'm going to leave the border box on. That's good. I think the margin I can take down a tiny bit. I don't think it needs to be quite that big. So let's set the margin to 15. I think that's what we had originally. And I probably don't want to have these dotted lines around it. But the dotted lines served a very good purpose for us. They allowed us to see the difference between where the padding stopped and where the margin started. Imagine if the border was 0 pixels to begin with. And of course, we wouldn't have dotted black because it's just 0 pixels. If that's the case, can you imagine playing with this? Now, I am seeing right now that I think the margin's still way too big. Way too big, especially since we have the padding. It looked better with the border on it, actually. But I'll put the border back on just so we can see it. Actually, I'll just do this. And I'll change it to 1 pixel so that we can see it again. And now let's make this margin a lot smaller. So let's make the margin actually only be 5 pixels and see how that looks. Because we have the padding as well. We're getting to use both of them in this case for what we want. Okay, that looks better. I think I'm going to decrease the padding just a tiny bit too. Maybe make it 10 pixels. And see, this is a game you can play yourself with your site just to try to get it as close to how you'd like it as possible. See, now that looks pretty good to me. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to actually remove the border and we'll see how it looks. So we'll take off the dotted black. We'll set the border to be 0. You can always go back and change it if we need to. And there we go. To me, that looks a lot better. Now, you also can use the box model for divs. Well, I said you could use it for anything, really, because everything's a box. But a lot of people use it for divs. And divs, paragraphs like I did here, just about anything. You can think of it as a box. And so, like the div, we have a border on it, so we can see kind of how it is, and we could set that up. In fact, I do have it set up now that I think about it. If I come over here to styles, you'll see I have a div with a width, a padding, a border, and a margin. Now, I don't have the box sizing border box, but this is another example of the box method right here already made in the program. The thing is, I just have one div. The only thing that's not really a traditional part of the box method is the fact that we have a text align, but there's nothing wrong with that. But we have the width is 500, the padding, the border, the margin, and we could adjust these. In fact, maybe we should adjust these a little bit. Let's see. I think that this could be a little bit smaller. I think the padding's too big. So let's take the padding down to be 10 pixels instead. Oops, I keep grabbing that. My mouse goes over the controls for Zoom. I know you don't see them, but then I can't get to my address bar. Did that change or did I forget to save it? No, I saved it. Let's see. Let's do 5. Huh. It's not changing. I thought that was a div. Let me make sure. That's under restoration. Yeah, there's a div there. Okay, so let's take a look. That's interesting. We're not seeing much. It could be, I think I know why. Let me try one thing here. Let's change it to 5 pixels and make sure we see a change. We don't see a change. Why not? Interesting. I wonder why we're not seeing that. Seems like, oh, I remember. Sometimes I have to click the refresh. Yeah, it doesn't always work for me. Sorry about that. I forgot. So now a lot changed because I kept decreasing it. So let's go ahead and put it back to solid. And let's put it back to the 1.75 that it was. And let's take a look at it now with a padding of 10 and margin. Padding of 5 and margin of 10. Okay, and so the padding's right there, but you see we have this, and that's because if you come over here and look, this is a paragraph. And so it has the defaults for the paragraph in there. So that's why we're getting the extra space. So if we want to, I think the margin's good. I don't think it needs a different margin. The reason there's such a high part here is because we have the 2 BRs with the space ampersand MBSP in there. So that's why there's that bigger space up there. That's fine. Yeah, maybe we should increase it a little bit so that it matches. We could decrease the width of the box, though. It doesn't need to be that big. So let's do that. I think that would make it look better. So let's go ahead and decrease this maybe to 450. And let's increase the padding to 15 to give so the bottom has some space as well. Because that paragraph, we could rewrite the paragraph. We could do that so that the paragraph doesn't have the space. Okay, that looks good. That looks pretty good. I think we'll leave it like that. So anyway, there's a couple examples. You could play with it to make it how you want, which is what you should do in your own project. Hopefully you can use now the box model in your future assignments and your final project when you create the site that's of your interest, like mine is of mine. So I hope you learned a lot out of this, and I will see you in the next video.